What if I told you one of the best cars you can buy right now is also a sales failure? What if I told you that Volkswagen's happiest, most emotionally successful vehicle in decades is being quietly sidelined in the United States because the spreadsheet says it shouldn't exist? Because that's exactly what's happening with the Volkswagen ID Buzz. There won't be a 2026 model year for the ID Buzz in America. Demand is slow. Inventory is lingering. VW is stretching 2025 models into mid-2026 and hoping the 2027 refresh can revive interest. And on paper, that makes sense. But emotionally, culturally, humanly, this feels like we're losing something important. The ID Buzz is not a rational vehicle. It is not efficient in the way people expect EVs to be. It is not affordable by mainstream standards. It is not optimized for long road trips. It is compromised, awkward, and flawed in ways that would normally doom any modern car. And yet, everywhere it goes, people light up. Kids, adults, strangers, neighbors, everyone reacts to it. In a world full of cars that try to impress you with numbers, the ID Buzz does something radical. It makes you feel good. The common belief today is that EVs must justify themselves through data: range, charging speed, price, performance, efficiency. These are the metrics that dominate every conversation. If an EV falls short in any of these categories, it's labeled a failure. That belief has shaped the market and trained buyers to view cars like smartphones, spec-driven, upgrade-focused, and emotionally neutral. But the ID Buzz doesn't play that game. Instead, it revives something the industry has largely abandoned: joy. Not excitement, not performance thrills, joy. The simple, childlike happiness of interacting with a vehicle that doesn't take itself too seriously and doesn't demand that you rationalize your emotions. And that's exactly why it's struggling. The proof is in the contradictions. The ID Buzz is the only electric minivan on sale in the United States. It should be a slam dunk. Families want space, EV buyers want something different, nostalgia sells, and yet the ID Buzz sits in a weird middle ground. Too expensive to be practical, too compromised to be logical, too joyful to be efficient. Let's talk about the flaws, because they're real, and pretending otherwise misses the point. With an EPA-rated 231 miles of range, the ID Buzz immediately disqualifies itself as a long-distance road trip vehicle for many buyers. Real-world highway driving brings that number closer to 180 or 200 miles, depending on conditions. For suburban use, it performs better, averaging around 2.8 miles per kilowatt hour, translating to roughly 240 miles of mixed driving. But the anxiety remains. Planning becomes part of the ownership experience. Charging is acceptable, but not class-leading. The 400-volt electrical architecture caps peak charging around 200 kilowatts, resulting in a 10 to 80% charge time of about 26 minutes. That's fine, until you compare it to newer competitors using 800-volt systems that charge faster despite having larger batteries. In a market moving rapidly toward quicker charging and longer range, the ID Buzz already feels behind. Then there's the price. Over $70,000 for a fully loaded Pro S Plus with all-wheel drive. Over $61,000 for the base model. That's serious money for a Volkswagen badge, especially when this isn't a luxury vehicle in the traditional sense. Yes, it has massaging seats, heated and cooled fronts, and plenty of tech, but it's not trying to be plush or prestigious. It's playful. And playful at $70,000 is a tough sell. Packaging compromises don't help. The battery under the floor means seats don't fold flat. The third row is removable, but each section weighs about 65 pounds and must be handled manually. There's a gap when seats are folded that requires creative solutions if you want a flat load floor. Window controls are an ergonomic nightmare, with a toggle system that feels like it escaped from a usability experiment gone wrong. Touch-based sliders for climate and volume are as frustrating as you'd expect. The ride quality, despite the upright seating and excellent visibility, suffers from limited suspension travel and large wheels wrapped in low-profile tires. On broken pavement, it feels more like a delivery van than a family cruiser, which makes sense considering there's a cargo version in Europe. By any rational standard, this is not a great car. And yet, none of that seems to matter. Because the moment people experience the ID Buzz, logic dissolves. Kids love it instantly. The tall glass, the space, the light, the feeling of openness, it transforms everyday errands into small adventures. Kids don't care about range calculations or charging curves. They care that the bus feels fun, that it feels different, that it makes them want to be in it. Adults aren't immune either. Friends ask about it, neighbors wander over, conversations start, poker nights turn into ID Buzz discussions. People who had no intention of buying one suddenly say, I kind of want one now. And that's the magic. Driving the ID Buzz doesn't make you feel fast, it doesn't make you feel efficient, it makes you feel happy. Stress fades, daily annoyances soften. The upright seating, massive windows, and relaxed demeanor create an experience that feels almost therapeutic. It's not transporting you, it's changing your mood. This is where the ID Buzz becomes something more than a car. It becomes a cultural artifact, a reminder of what vehicles used to represent before optimization took over, before everything had to justify itself with data, before emotion was treated as an inefficiency. The original VW bus wasn't great by modern standards either. It was slow, noisy, underpowered, and impractical in countless ways. But it symbolized freedom, community, and optimism. It wasn't bought because it made sense, it was bought because it made people feel something. The ID Buzz carries that same DNA into the electric age, and that's exactly why it struggles in today's market, because we've trained ourselves to dismiss joy as frivolous. The market doesn't reward happiness, it rewards optimization, crossovers that all look the same, EVs that promise efficiency above all else, vehicles designed to offend no one and excite no one. The ID Buzz stands in direct opposition to that philosophy. It is unapologetically niche, unapologetically emotional, unapologetically flawed. And the market doesn't know what to do with that anymore. Volkswagen skipping the 2026 model year in the US isn't an indictment of the ID Buzz as a concept. It's an indictment of our priorities. It's proof that the industry struggles to justify products that lead with emotion rather than metrics. This isn't about whether the ID Buzz is worth the money. It's about whether we're willing to admit that not everything valuable can be measured. Because here's the truth, almost every criticism of the ID Buzz is valid, and almost every criticism misses the point. Yes, it's expensive. Yes, the range is limited. Yes, the controls are frustrating. Yes, the ride could be better. And yes, none of that stops people from loving it. That contradiction is the entire story. The ID Buzz shows us that joy still matters, even if the market pretends it doesn't. It reminds us that cars can be more than transportation appliances, that they can create memories, that they can bring people together, that they can make kids beg for road trips even when they know it'll take longer. The tragedy isn't that the ID Buzz sells slowly. The tragedy is that we're surprised it exists at all. Because the world needs more vehicles like this, not necessarily more ID Buzzes, but more cars that dare to prioritize how they make people feel. Cars that aren't afraid to be imperfect. Cars that remind us why we fell in love with automobiles in the first place. The ID Buzz may be deeply flawed, but in a market full of perfectly competent machines that leave us cooled, it dares to be warm, and that matters more than we're willing to admit. So here's the question I want you to answer. Would you rather drive a car that makes sense or a car that makes you smile every single day? Drop your take in the comments. I want to see where you land. And if you want more stories about cars that challenge the way we think about the market, make sure you're subscribed because the next one might remind you why you cared about cars at all.